Take it off. Take it. I was going to say something nice because it's your birthday, and I was going to be nice until you put that hat on. They did for those who are listening to the audio version of the show, which many of you do. It's Paul's birthday, but more importantly, he had a Boston Red Sox hat on because they won the World Series after a very strenuous 24-month drought of winning the World Series. They are now back.
It's been a tough 16 years. Oh wait, no, it hasn't.
Yeah, I was gonna say, Paul. Last time the Reds won the World Series was in 1990. Last time the Bengals won a playoff game, I was 5 years old. And
when my son was growing up, the Patriots started winning championships, like a bunch of them, all back-to-back championships, 3 of 4, years. I mean, it was crazy. The Celtics won in 2008. The Bruins won in 2011. The Red Sox won in 2004, I think, 2007, 2013.
So are you telling us, Paul, that Boston's success in sports is directly related to the birth of your son?
No, but I grew up in Boston as well, and I said, you don't understand. It's not like this. When I was growing up, the Red Sox never won a championship. They got close a couple of years, 76, 86.
Yeah.
The Patriots got close. No, they didn't get close, but they got to the championship in 93. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
The Bruins were kind of always in the mix, but never got there since the Bobby Orr days. The Celtics did win 3 championships in the 80s, and then the most terrible period of time in the history of basketball for me ever occurred. And I just said, look, it just doesn't, this isn't normal, But my son got all these things. Like, as he was growing up, they made Star Wars movies again. They started making Indiana Jones movies again. I'm like, what? Yeah. What are you, the golden child? Like, you just get everything I wanted my whole life is just going to happen to you now, So, yeah, it's been, I'm just happy I can go to bed at a normal time now. I got to be honest. Everyone was like, we want to close this thing out before we go back to Boston. And I was like, yeah, so I can get some sleep,
Well, there you go for anybody who watched baseball. Paul just spoiled it for you if you didn't catch up on any of the headlines.
Yeah, I hope it wasn't on the VCR.
Yeah.
Or whatever you're using.
Well, Paul, for your birthday, I was going to buy you something, but the problem is IBM went and bought it ahead of me.
Right.
For those who aren't aware, IBM is going to pay a 60% premium for Red Hat Linux, which is going to come in around $30 billion, give or take. I think 34 was the actual number.
34, yeah.
Yeah, and IBM or Red Hacks. I cannot talk today. Side note: I'm really pissed off because I owe a lot of money to fix my car if I want to fix it.
I think this is car related.
It is. We'll get to that later. But Red Hat's market cap is around $20 billion, and IBM's going to pay $34 billion. And I think that's one of those things we're going to make you an offer you can't refuse, because I don't think anybody would turn that down ever to pay an extra $14 billion over the value of the company.
I thought Linux was free, but I don't understand. There was a really smart article, I think it was in TechCrunch, where they kind of said, this move is really smart for IBM because now they can get past the Watson thing, which was never going to make them any money.
Yeah.
And was just marketing nonsense. Like, look, we're still relevant. Look, we have AI, and get to the thing that's really going to make them money, which is the thing that Microsoft's doing, right? This transforming companies digitally, right? And I think out in the enterprise space, there are 2 main platforms, and Microsoft has one, and Linux is the other one. And the biggest Linux company on earth is Red Hat, and so Microsoft or IBM rather had invested in and partnered with Red Hat for many years. So this probably makes tons of sense. And this is nice because now instead of ignoring both these companies, I can just ignore one company and it's fine.
Yeah. It took me a minute to realize what you just said. Yeah. And it's brilliant in its simplicity.
Because who gives a shit about this? I mean, like, seriously, like, is there anything less boring than these 2 guys?
Well, I honestly think that IBM was looking at themselves circling the drain. Granted, IBM is still a massive company, $113 billion market cap. And so they are making money. They're just not making what people generally refer to as new money, right? They're just living off of the legacy that they had in the 90s, and they're selling consulting services and all that. And they said, okay, we got to pivot the whole company. How are we going to do that? And somebody said, why don't we buy Linux? And they said, well, we can't buy Linux. What's the next best thing?
This is like like an energy company that has to turn to fracking. This is like where IBM is now. Like what can we beat to death now?
Yeah, we've sucked the well dry. Let's see if we can get something out of the rocks lining
exactly.
the well.
Can we crush the rocks on the bottom of the well and see if we can eke any liquid out of that?
Yeah. As funny as this acquisition is, I think you're right. It's the right move for IBM to at least have a shot at being relevant for the next couple decades. So we will see what happens here.
I do think it makes sense. I just don't think I care.
Yeah. Well, there were other rumors that Oracle was supposedly trying to poach Red Hat as well.
Oh yes, the holy trinity of nonsense. Add Oracle to the mix. Linux, IBM, and Oracle's database solutions. The win-win for the future.
This is like when your great uncles get together and talk about the war stories of how they once were getting ladies on the beaches.
Mm-hmm.
And so
I miss leaded gas.
Yeah, the old timers trying to buy up the new kids. So, although Red Hat isn't really new, that's probably not even fair to say to them. They've been around for a long time. They've just
years, right? I mean,
they've just found a way to
years.
be sustainable and relevant. And IBM is
Yeah, they were one of the early Linux companies, and they are obviously the most prominent, I guess, and most professional. And they turned to business very early on. I mean, the Red Hat distribution was one of the big deals in the early days, and then they kind of, as they went to the enterprise, they introduced this Fedora thing, and I think for individuals who do care about Linux, I don't think Red Hat is really kind of a big deal anymore.
There was I remember this from business school, and I can't remember the people's names, but it was IBM. I know it was IBM. Mm-hmm. And when they were trying to turn around their business, I think this is maybe a decade or 2 decades ago, 10, 15 years ago, and the CEO at the time was going and talking to all of their clients and asking them, what they liked about their software. And almost all of them said, we don't like your software. It's fine, but we don't like it. And he said, why are you still buying it? And he goes, because you have a local office and I can yell at somebody if something goes wrong.
That's great.
And that was their differentiator, though. Everybody else just had software. You just go buy it if you need to scream at someone. You couldn't go down the street. Wow. And so here's IBM snatching up a Linux, which is typically frustrating to use for the novice user, that is. But now there's going to be somebody on every street corner for those companies to yell at, and I think it's going to work out well.
Paul Allen just died, obviously, and it's sort of triggered me thinking back to the early days of the PC industry, and IBM was obviously a primary part of that story, and the efforts to build the first PEC and find an OS, which eventually brought in Microsoft and triggered this whole snowball of terrible, unreliable software that is Microsoft. But like Lou Gerstner, one of the former CEOs, wrote a book called, I think it was called Dancing with Elephants, which is really interesting. There were some real characters there back in the day. IBM almost bought Apple at one time. There's some really interesting stories. But when Microsoft, I'm sorry, geez, you think you have a problem talking. When IBM sold off their PC business to Lenovo, they just kind of dropped off the planet for me. And when I first started reviewing hardware, IBM still owned ThinkPad, and the first ThinkPads I ever reviewed, were IBMs. They had IBM logos on them and everything, and then they didn't, and IBM they became like nothing to me. And I think this is obviously the worry with Microsoft, as Microsoft turns to the cloud, especially the enterprise cloud. It's going to be, when people say Microsoft is becoming IBM, this is kind of what they mean. Not that they become irrelevant, right? The future Microsoft could very well be much bigger than the current Microsoft, but it's going to be more focused on this kind of stuff. And so I'm kind of clinging here to, the last piece of wood in the water, and and hoping the Microsoft stuff doesn't completely disappear on the client side or the consumer side or whatever. But for IBM, obviously, it's just long gone.
Yeah, and IBM's ploy from this is that they're hoping to, they claim they're going to become the hybrid cloud leader. I don't know how they measure that benchmark, but that's where there's a lot of money in that segment, and that's what kind of everyone thinking is it's on-premises will never go away, but it's always just going to be this hybrid world going forward, and IBM is trying to grab a big slice of that by buying Red Hat, provided all things get approved.
Yeah, I think it was actually Larry Ellison from Oracle who complained that cloud computing was nothing new and blah 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 whatever. But when you talk about we're going to have a public cloud and we're going to have a hybrid cloud and we're going to have a private cloud. But it's like we're just talking about service here, and it's like okay, fine. But I think the big difference between today and this hybrid stuff, no matter who you're talking about, and the past is just the central management capabilities. Bridging a local data center with an external one that you don't control is actually kind of a big deal.
Yeah.
And I don't, IBM didn't get there first for sure, but I'm sure there'll be a major player.
Or second, let's just be.
Or even, I'm not sure they're even in the top 10.
Probably not.
Whatever.
Maybe third or fourth. We'll see.
Yes. Well, I mean, look, they are a big boulder, so they're rolling down a hill now. You have to kind of deal with it one way or the other. So, I guess we'll see what happens.
Yep, and other things that will, other things that kind of happened over the weekend. Microsoft, in their always oddly timed announcements or whatever updates, 1.5. Right. They're reiterating the 1.5 billion PCs in the market, which is an interesting number for multiple reasons, and I think Paul will probably agree here. Mostly because we know that there's roughly 700 million Windows 10 users, somewhere around that number, ballparking it. Which means there's 800 million people that still are devices that need to be upgraded. But Paul, we also got some other interesting numbers with the help of some other people. If you remember, Microsoft said there were 50% whatever commercial install rate for Windows 10.
That's right. Yeah.
There was a number that was dug up that says, hey, Microsoft at one point, and this was like late September in 2018, they said there's about 200 million commercial devices running it, so which means that install base could be potentially about 400 million for commercial devices, roughly total.
Right, which is a tiny percentage of the total install base for Windows PCs, right? Which is kind of not what we expect.
It seems smaller, but the bigger point there is that, so let's say there's 200 million left. That means there's 600 million non-commercial, potentially non-commercial devices. Granted, these are very rough numbers that and about 14 months are no longer going to be supported.
Right. I mean, I look at this as kind of a good news, bad news thing. I mean, the 1.5 billion figure, Microsoft used this exact number 3 years ago and then had never updated it, right? So them coming out this past week and saying, okay, there are 1.5 billion active Windows PCs out in the world. We have to assume this is accurate, right? These computers are connected to the internet. They're getting Windows updates. Microsoft has this number, and this is the number. So this is accurate. The 700 million number is accurate, although I didn't write this in the post I wrote, but I guess it's worth pointing out that some of those devices are Xboxes, HoloLens, Surface Hubs, probably even some phones, small numbers. But, let's say somewhere well north of 600 million of those are PCs, right? Probably even more, but whatever. So the question is this good or bad? Right. Is this the fact that the installed base has not changed in 3 years? Is that bad, good, and different? What is that? And I actually think it's pretty good news because the PC market has really fallen hard over the past several years from a market share perspective. So the fact that we haven't seeded any users, right, tells me that the new PC sales are going to existing users they're upgrading, which is great.
Yep.
And in some cases, they're offsetting, like whatever the new users are offsetting the users who are leaving the platform because they're going to mobile, maybe to an iPad, maybe to a Chromebook, whatever it might be. And so honestly, given the state of the PC industry, the fact that this number has remained unchanged, assuming it's not like an outright lie or whatever,
right,
is I think it's good news,
Yeah. It's interesting. It's going to be, well, the thing I was also looking at too is that in theory, roughly, about 14 months from now, Windows 10 should be hitting 1 billion users. It should, and if it doesn't, that's going to be a problem because obviously then people aren't upgrading. Enterprise didn't hit that mark because if you even add just 200 million for the remaining enterprise customers, which should be even ballpark and say 150.
Yeah.
You're getting close to that 900 million, and then the consumers are going to have to move. So it'll be.
Yeah, I think that, right. The Windows 7 expiration is obviously the key to this 1 billion thing. Yeah, we'll see. I mean, I do think it's going to follow the same trajectory as the last big upgrade, the Windows XP thing. There's going to be some big percentage of the enterprise that is not ready for that date. Microsoft's probably going to move dates around for them. Obviously, they can get paid support. We'll see. This is going to be very interesting.
Yeah, it will be. And yeah, I think some people were downing that this wasn't fast enough or that Windows 10 was a failure because of this. I don't interpret it that way at all. 700 million is a massive, massive amount of people for, let's be candid, pretty much a legacy product at this point. So
yeah. The other way to look at it is as a percentage of the user base at the time. And Windows 10 entered the market at a time when the PC market had crashed through the floor. It still is generating, a couple 100 million new devices a year, and a lot of people did upgrade for free right off the bat. So, yeah, the phone thing didn't pan out, I guess, but some readers tell me it meets all of their needs still, but
it's fine for my needs.
It sure is. So, but yes, I mean, and I think it's also notable, for all the gains Apple has made in mobile. Mac market share this past quarter, we'll see what happens this quarter, but this past quarter was the lowest it's been in like 7 years. The Mac never, for all of Apple's successes, the Mac is a very profitable product line.
Right.
Don't get me wrong, but as far as taking advantage of what's happened to the PC market, they've done nothing, and in fact have often trailed the PC market as far as growth. Chromebooks have made a big difference, and I think the situation there is you've finally got like a desktop platform that's actually super inexpensive and super easy, and there you go. So there's a benefit to it. The Mac is just harder and more expensive, so it's kind of a tougher sell, when you think about it. Anyway, look, whatever. Windows up and down, we can debate it all day, but I think Windows 10 is a huge success overall.
Yeah, I think it's done well, and they will eventually get most of those people onto Windows 10 at some point, and Microsoft is not going to there's no Windows 11 coming, so everybody will be on Windows 10 at one point, and that will be a huge help to them with overhead. Right. So, a couple other quick things here. Apple's got an event tomorrow. There's a OnePlus event here in a few minutes, which this podcast will not cover because we don't know what it is.
Well, I'll be watching it. I'm not sure if you're going to watch it, but I will be reviewing the device. I apparently have one of these coming sometime this week. I'm holding out some vague hope that the camera in this thing is excellent, in which case Paul might be making some different life choices soon, but we'll see.
And because I brought it up on the show earlier, my vehicle, I took it to the dealership this morning, and they want $2,700 to fix a radiator and a couple seals and everything else. And Paul, hey, did you know I'm writing a book that everyone should probably buy about 2,700 copies of?
Right, I was going to say, if you want to keep using your car, I have an idea.
So there is that. Yeah. You got anything else for today, Mr. Throt, on your birthday?
Just real quick, I just wanted, because I've gotten so many questions about it. We had that documentary film crew in my house over the weekend. I think you saw the pictures or whatever. I put some photos up on Instagram, which is kind of like for the public, and then I put some more family photos type things on Facebook, which is just for people I really know. But the long and the short of it is what I think I mentioned the background of this the other day. But my son almost died, had meningitis, bacterial meningitis. Pfizer makes a vaccine that would prevent that from happening. So your child was vaccinated, I'm sure, and has no worry of ever having what happened to my son. My son, the three likely outcomes were death, mental retardation, or deafness. So I guess he kind of won the lottery on that one, but he's deaf, and so he's been very successful with cochlear implants. He's going to a college now that has a great program for the deaf, and he's just been a shining success. And so my wife is an advocate for my son and for cochlear implants and for vaccines. She's kind of the anti-Jenny McCarthy in so many ways, but she wrote she's a writer, as you know, and she wrote an article about vaccines and the importance of vaccines and told the story of our son in that story. And this company reached out to her. This was years ago. We've been talking about doing this since my son was still in high school. We were still living in Dedham. They were going to come there. It was, and it kept getting pushed back, whatever. And so They wanted to do it this summer, but we were away. This was like the one weekend where it kind of made sense. Mark came back, and it was this crazy production. It was amazing. I mean, the house was just full of people and full of camera equipment and whatever. But it looks like it's going to come out great. People have been asking me, what the vaccine is, what the company is, what the thing is. It's going to be a documentary. It's going to be put on the Pfizer website. It probably won't be until the beginning of next summer. So it's going to be like 8 months or something before we see this thing. But based on the footage we saw, that they did an amazing job. I mean, it's crazy. And they had representatives from the company who were kind of really, really excited about what they got. But I'm sort of in it. But I mean, mostly it's my wife and my son, and my daughter's sort of in it as well. There's a couple of little scenes but we don't talk. So my wife was interviewed, and
nice.
Yeah. And anyway, so
it'll be neat.
That's what that was, and I'll let you know when it's out.
Yeah, I saw all those pictures, and I wanted to comment on there, be like, can they stick around for an episode of FRD so we can have proper lighting and everything?
I told the guys, they were like, what do you do for a living? And I'm like, actually, I said, I kind of went through the whole thing. I said, I record podcasts and blah, blah, blah. And so they kind of came in, they were looking at my office, and they said, so this is where the magic happens? And I was like, yeah. And he's like, they were like, that's cute. They had like this gimbal thing that was like 4 feet by 4 feet, and the camera on it had a, like a lens on it that was humongous, widescreen thing. It was the equipment they had was astonishing, and it was really kind of cloudy and rainy, and so we did the outside stuff the second day when it was a little less so. But they do lighting in such a way that it looks like the sun's out. Like it's they have all these lighting things they do. It's astonishing. Like it's really rather amazing. And for them, this is like a small job. They were like, we do commercials and little movies and things, and we often bring in 18-wheelers worth of equipment, and it's a big production. They're like, this is nothing. And I was like, this is like what it must be like when the Rolling Stones go on tour. Like, I couldn't believe how much equipment was in my house. Like, it was insanity. But they kind of set it up, broke it down, they left, they came back, they set it up. It was like this.
Nice.
Yeah, it was amazing.
Like professionals.
Yeah. It was really interesting to see what professionals like. I'm like, my friend Brad has like a camera, like a little iPhone he puts in this little cute gimbal thing, and they were like, oh.
Is it bright orange and pink and just Fisher Price on the side?
It has like clown ears on it, or clown nose on it. And
always so insensitive. All right, folks. Well, that wraps it up for today. We'll be back tomorrow at some point tomorrow, because the Apple thing is actually relatively early. It's on the East Coast. But have yourselves a wonderful Monday, and we'll catch you later.